In the heart of southern Africa, where the Mopane woodland stretches endlessly beneath a burning sky, where the ground bakes hard in the dry season and the night air hums with the sounds of creatures unseen, there exists a place that has humbled the bravest of men. Hwanga National Park in Zimbabwe, known in the colonial era as Wanki, is one of Africa's last great wildlife sanctuaries. It is home to tens of thousands of elephants, vast herds of buffalo, and somewhere between 400 and 500 lions. It is a place of extraordinary beauty. It is also a place where the darkness can turn deadly in a single, breathless second. This is the story of the attacks. The real ones. The ones that happened when the generator was switched off, when the camp fell silent, and when something ancient and utterly merciless came padding out of the night. We begin in April 1972. Rhodesia, as Zimbabwe was then known, was a country already beginning to fracture under the pressures of a growing bush war. But deep inside Wanki National Park, at a remote field camp called Shapi Pan, the world still felt quiet. Warden Len Harvey was a man of great reputation in the National Park Service, a veteran of the bush, respected by everyone who had served alongside him. He had spent his career in these wild places, comfortable with danger in the way that only those who have lived alongside it for decades can be. He had recently done something that surprised many of his colleagues. After years as a confirmed bachelor, Len Harvey had fallen in love and gotten married. His new bride was Jean, and in the early days of April 1972, the couple were spending their honeymoon at Shapi Pan. It was, by all accounts, an idyllic setting. Also in camp were Senior Ranger Willie DeBeer, an experienced hunter and former Rhodesian Army career officer, his wife Hazel, and his stepson Colin Matthews. They were enjoying a peaceful break. The camp was largely empty. The culling contractor had given most of his staff time off. A cadet ranger had left for 10 days leave. It was quiet. It was supposed to be safe. But Willie DeBeer was worried. In the days leading up to what would become one of the most harrowing nights in Rhodesian wildlife history, he had been tracking the spoor of a solitary lion. From the prints alone, he had deduced it was either an old female or a young male. What concerned him was not the size of the animal, but its behavior. This lion had become brazen in a way that set every instinct in DeBeer's experienced body on edge. It had broken into the cook's chicken coop and killed every bird inside. It had attempted to force its way into staff huts. And then DeBeer found something that turned his blood cold. He followed the lion's tracks directly into the vacated quarters of Cadet Ranger Richard Dendy, who had fortunately already left on leave. The lion had wandered through the empty rooms and spent time inside. And then DeBeer found where it had scooped a hollow in the sand and bedded down for the night, directly below the window opening of Warden Len Harvey's house. DeBeer immediately warned Harvey. He proposed a practical solution. Shoot a wildebeest, drag it around the camp perimeter, and hang the carcass 10 kilometers away to lure the lion off. Warden Harvey declined. His philosophy, shared by many in the Park Service, was one of absolute non-interference with wildlife, noble in principle, fatal in practice. Harvey and his new wife, Jean, were reportedly more fascinated than frightened by the lion's proximity. They had no idea that the animal was starving, and they had no idea that within hours, Len Harvey would be dead. On the night of the 3rd of April, shortly after 11 o'clock, with the generator switched off and the camp plunged into darkness, the starving lioness made her move. She came through the open window of the Harveys' sleeping quarters like a tawny missile. She landed directly on Jean, whose terrified screams ripped through the night. Len Harvey, newly married, desperately in love, and with everything to live for, did the only thing a man in that position could do. He threw himself at the lion with his bare hands. He fought barehanded in the dark against a 260-pound lioness, shouting for John to run. John managed to escape through the rear door, but even as she ran toward DeBeer's quarters, she stopped. She could hear the sounds from the hut. She turned back. Then the sounds told her it was already too late. She turned again and ran, hammering on DeBeer's door, drenched in blood, screaming her husband's name. What happened next became one of the most extraordinary acts of courage ever recorded in the annals of African wildlife. Willie DeBeer and his stepson Colin Matthews ran to the gun safe in the dark, fumbling in total darkness for ammunition and firearms. De Beer grabbed a .375 Holland and Holland and handed a .243 Winchester to young Colin, a city boy with limited knowledge of firearms. They ran toward the lit bedroom window of Harvey's hut, De Beer clutching the .375 with the safety off. He approached the window slowly, calling Harvey's name into the darkness. The response from inside was a deep, throaty warning growl. De Beer leaned carefully forward into the window opening. He never saw the paw coming. It slammed into his skull with the force of a sledgehammer. Claws tore through his scalp and dug into the bone beneath. A sheet of blood cascaded down his face. The lioness came through the window and continued her attack outside, and De Beer dropped his rifle. Half his torn scalp hung down over his face like a red curtain, blinding him. She clamped her jaws over his head and tried to drag him away. He could hear his own nose and cheekbones breaking. His right eye came out of its socket and hung against his cheek. When he tried to fight back with his bare hands, the attack intensified. So he forced himself to lie still, to accept the mauling, to wait. Eventually, the lioness slackened her grip and began licking the blood from his ruined face. And then, hearing a sound from Colin, she turned. She dropped De Beer and charged the young man with a roar that shook the night. Colin Matthews, in an act of either extraordinary bravery or pure survival instinct, shoved his right arm as far down the lioness's throat as he could. Her jaws closed on his wrist like a vice. He could feel the bones shatter. Willie De Beer, semi-conscious, blinded, with both hands broken beyond use, heard his stepson's screams. He rolled onto his stomach. With fingers that were little more than pulverized bone wrapped in torn flesh, he felt through the darkness for the dropped rifle. He found the .243 underneath the hindquarters of the lioness. He pulled it free. He pointed the barrel toward the sound of the snarling, and he fired. Then again. Then a third time. One bullet passed through the lioness's skull. Another passed through her mouth and shattered Colin's wrist. The great cat grunted, convulsed, and collapsed. In the silence that followed, De Beer called out into the darkness. Colin answered. They were both alive. Len Harvey was not. His body was found on the floor of the bedroom, surrounded by blood. The lioness lay dead outside the window where De Beer had finally killed her. Willie De Beer required 222 stitches to his head alone. He underwent months of skin and bone grafts. He did not lose his eyesight. Colin Matthews had his hand surgically reattached by trauma surgeon Dr. David Hay at Wanky Colliery Hospital, a man described by all who knew him as decades ahead of his time. Jean Harvey recovered from shock and lacerations. And then, 10 days after her wedding, she arranged her husband's funeral. A post-mortem on the lioness found her stomach contained earthworms, chicken feathers, and human flesh. She was estimated to be between 6 and 7 years old. Her teeth were in perfect condition. She was not old. She was not injured. She was starving, increasingly desperate, and ignored for too long. 5 days later, in a completely separate incident, 450 kilometers to the east, near Boomy Hills on the shores of Lake Kariba, Rhodesia suffered a second fatal lion attack within a single week. Lieutenant Al Turrell was a decorated soldier, holder of the Bronze Cross of Rhodesia, a man who had personally accounted for 6 enemy combatants in a single engagement during the Bush War. He was running an Army tracker training course in the wild escarpment country south of Boomy Hills. It was the evening of the 9th of April, 1972. The weather was cold and miserable, the air thick with goody, that particular Rhodesian mixture of mist and drizzle that hangs at ground level and swallows the light. Turrell and Major Fred Watts were standing beside a small fire, drinking coffee and talking quietly. Sergeant Pete Clements was nearby. He caught a flicker of movement in his peripheral vision, and then time collapsed. A lioness, already in full charge, was hugging the ground with her rear legs coiled beneath her. She hit Turrell from behind with the force of a vehicle. The impact broke his neck and spine simultaneously. She punctured his left lung with her claws, all in a single fluid motion. As she dragged him across the ground, in his agony and shock, Turrell called out twice for his wife. He called for Molly. Sergeant Andre Raby fired 2 shots into the ground beside the lioness. She released Turrell and vanished into the dark. But she came back. 3 times she came back through the firelight, each time driven off by shouting, shots fired into the air, the desperate noise of soldiers who were afraid and trying not to show it. One young soldier climbed a tree and refused to come down until firmly ordered. Al Turte, lying paralyzed in the dirt with a broken neck and spine, a punctured lung, and the cold drizzle falling on him, told his men not to attempt to run for help. The lioness was still out there. It was too dangerous. He lay there for hours, conscious, composing a letter dictated to Sergeant Raby, who sat beside his dying officer in the wet dark and wrote down every word. Turrell spoke about his wife, his children, his parents, his brothers. It took nearly 10 hours from the moment of the attack before a helicopter could reach the position. Al Turrell died at 4:45 in the morning. He was given a full military funeral, attended by soldiers and civilians from across Rhodesia. The lioness was found to have a broken canine with a hollow cavity inside it. Whether this caused her any pain, experts could not say with certainty. What they agreed on was that her behavior was aberrant. Both lionesses, the one at Shapipan and the one at Boomy Hills, were adult females in their physical prime, with good coats and strong teeth. Neither fitted the classic profile of the injured or elderly man-eater. Something else had driven them to it. Something that the experts noted but could not fully explain. As Kevin Thomas, the Rhodesian game ranger and author who documented these events, once wrote, "When the sun goes down, there is very little on this planet Earth that a lion is afraid of. After dark, they are something else entirely." Decades passed. The park was renamed. Rhodesia became Zimbabwe. Wanki became Hwange. The lions were still there. In April 2014, a 7-year-old boy named in local records only as a grade 1 pupil at Sheyo Primary School set off along a path near the park boundary to visit a neighbor. A male lion intercepted him. The lion killed the child, dragged him 110 meters from the path, and left the body concealed beneath a thick bush while it rested 100 meters away. Zimbabwe Parks rangers tracked the lion and destroyed it. The child was buried. His name did not make international news. In August 2015, Quinn Swales, a 40-year-old professional safari guide with decades of bush experience, was leading 6 tourists on a walking safari inside Hwange National Park. They encountered a pride. The male began to approach. Quinn did what every professional guide trains for. He positioned himself between the lion and his clients, briefed the group calmly, and told them not to move. The lion was a collared male named Nsa Ha. He circled away. Then he came back. Quinn Swales could not fire his rifle in time. The lion came too fast. He took the full force of the charge with his own body. He was thrown to the ground, bitten in the shoulder and neck. The screaming of his guests drove the lion off. Quinn Swales died at the scene. Every one of his clients walked away unharmed. A senior safari official who knew Quinn stated afterward that he could not recall an unprovoked attack of this nature in the Hwange area in 30 to 40 years. He said it was no reason to stop walking safaris. He said Quinn had done everything right. In April 2020, a 40-year-old man named Thomas Muputsa, an employee of the National Railways of Zimbabwe, disembarked from a vehicle about 1 kilometer short of his stop to walk to his father's funeral in a nearby village. He was in the Deet area, on the boundary between Hwange National Park and the communal land where people live. He never arrived at the funeral. His remains were discovered the following day, located by the circling of vultures overhead. Since 2018, the deaths have climbed. Government figures confirm 71 people killed by wildlife in Zimbabwe in 2021 alone, 68 in 2022. The unfenced edges of wilderness where people walk to school, collect water, and move through the darkness between villages and riverbanks, unaware that something is watching. These are not the stories of rogue animals acting against their nature. These are the stories of lions being exactly what they are, doing exactly what apex predators do in a landscape where the boundaries between the wild and the human world have never truly existed. Willie De Beer survived with 222 stitches and a face rebuilt by surgery. Colin Matthews kept his hand. Jean Harvey became a widow 10 days after her wedding. Al Turrell called for his wife in the dark and did not make it to mourning. Quinn Swales saved 6 lives with his own. Thomas Muputsa walked toward his father's funeral and never came home. A 7-year-old boy walked a familiar path and never returned. Hwange is still there. The lions are still there. Every single night, somewhere along that unfenced boundary between the park and the people, the darkness falls. The generator is switched off, and Africa reminds the world who it belongs to.